Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. Be sure to listen to aBlogtoWatch's other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, I am once again joined by aBlogtoWatch's David Bredan. David, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
So we need to have David on each, I guess, couple of months at least, though it's been a little bit longer than that, for a reality check. You know, the watch industry gets a little bit crazy. And David, you need to come in for a reality check. So hopefully we'll be talking about some areas where the watch industry is not aware of reality, and you need to tell them what's going on. So that will be a big part of the show. I just shared with David a song that I think should definitely be the intro of a podcast. There was a bit of a copyright issue, and I don't know about getting permission, but it is Reelin' and Rockin' by the great early rock and roller Chuck Berry. I think this one's from 1958. Now, the most common 1950s rock and roll song related to timekeeping is Rock Around the Clock, okay, which I think came a few years earlier. But what you don't know about Reelin' Rockin', if you haven't heard it, is that Chuck Berry is obsessively staring at his watch, right?
And reporting time as it passes, basically.
Yeah, so he's got these great like rhyming lyrics that go with it. But if you think about what he's doing, like, as David said, only a few minutes goes by. So he's clearly watch obsessed. He's one of us. Even back in the 1950s, he's rocking, rolling about it, and he's thinking of a fun way of doing it. But he's singing a song about staring at his watch all the time, which is what we do, right?
Yes, I love that. Maybe we don't report every minute, but that's okay.
Well, we're not rock and rollers. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be. I know that there's a lot of musicians out there that like watches. Do they write songs about watches, or they just throw the names of the watches in the song sometimes?
There was sometimes there are cool references, like my Rollies don't tick tock, you know, which is basically to say that it's not a fake with a quartz movement. So sometimes there are like very specific technical references, and sometimes it's
that's good.
It's just
a lot of it is name dropping, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is just that.
It's just so weird. The first few times I heard that, I was not amongst the first, because I'm never amongst the first to hear that genre. But they were like, oh yeah, they're singing about the watches. It's like, okay, so let me hear these songs. And they're just like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Richard Mille. It's like, it's like they just throw the name on there. Da-da-da-da-da, AP. It's like, you could have just mentioned anything, but they're just like, it's not even part of the story. And there's something specific to that brand. It's just like, something expensive that I can wear.
Exactly.
And I was like, that's not really integrating into the song. And, brands would have all these musicians as their ambassadors. I think there still are some. Wouldn't you have a watch brand? Like, I don't want to say demand, but be like, okay, you're an ambassador. Could you just write a song about watches? Doesn't have to be our watch, though. That'd be great. But just like write a song about being into watches. There's plenty of songs about being in love, and enough of those turned into being in love with your car, So could you write a song about being in love with your watch or multiple watches?
No, I think that sounds kind of. It's interesting because somehow it never comes to that. Mostly, it's just status. It's just showing off. That's the impression I get. We never really pass into being in love with a watch. I'm not in love with my watches anyway, so I don't.
Yeah, but
think
we
I could do
love
that.
songs. So I'm just trying to think about the easiest way of getting. I mean, no one's going to write about their appreciation for horology with melody.
Maybe we can have AI write something like that. That would be hilarious.
I think we've tried that.
Yeah, I know. How did that work out for us? Oh,
what would you say? AI, write me song lyrics, and then what would you have to do? You have to tell them the watch, like, random Rolex, whatever. Like, I love this watch so much that if I wrote an opera about it, what would the lyrics be?
Read the entire website of the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry and then come back with something that rhymes.
Yeah. As though you were the FHH, sing a serenade to Vacheron Constantin.
I think my ears would bleed, but
I don't think we're having enough fun with generative AI. I think that's the problem.
like good fun, not just maybe there's room for that. I mean, we should not anticipate the watch industry to embrace a new piece of technology, in haste.
Well, we did make a promise
to
other members of the aBlogtoWatch team that we would do a no AI content pledge, which I guess makes sense in the era. And what we did, everyone, is we basically said that we will never use AI to generate reporting on watches, which we won't. I don't know that we ever want to limit ourselves, that we'll never do any AI anything, but definitely not reviews or coverage. But I feel that we constantly go back to a comedic thing. Like, wouldn't it be funny if AI did this? I mean, I've done April Fools about AI before already. I guess, yes, we're not going to like deceive people and have content that looks like it's human be passed off as something that it's not. But I think that there could be an AI humor component, or is that just too easy at this point?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, whether it's too easy or not. I think it's like any other tool. You can get lazy with it, or you can get incredibly creative and fantastic with it. I think it really depends, because I've had this discussion a couple of times over the last year where creative people were worried that, AI would take their job or whatever. But to which I said, just because there's Photoshop now and you don't have to learn how to paint, you still have to be a trained or an extremely talented graphic designer to make good use of Photoshop. It's always like, not the ability of the tool, but what you can do with it. So I think that's the same for AI.
And AI is a tool like Photoshop, and they're both hard to use.
Exactly.
Photoshop's probably notoriously harder, but like, I feel like it doesn't eliminate the need for a designer, like a watch designer. Like a CEO still can't be like, screw all those watch designers. I'm going to ChatGPT, or that's not a visual one, but like going to generative AI and saying, what should the next Ulysses Nardon watch be? But it still takes that designer to look at what AI did and be like, no, that's super dumb, right? Like you still, like the designer now, rather than maybe doing all the artwork themselves, does parts of it or spends most of their time consulting with generative AI. But I just feel like really all it is that people need to learn a new tool set, which, don't get me wrong, is hard, but I don't see the human going away from graphic design at all.
No, and I think it's also about, how much time you spend with stuff that you don't want to spend time with. That is not something that makes your creative process easier. Just because people used to draw cars on like these gigantic design boards, basically, and like use rulers and pencils and whatever else just to figure out where things fall on a car and how it will go together, that did not necessarily lead to better cars or more beautiful cars or something like that. So just now that they have CAD, computer assisted design, they can figure all those things out in 10 or 20 or 100 times faster, and they can focus on being creative. So if there's anything I expect from AI is to make things easier. Is this where you don't have to spend months or years learning Photoshop and just seeing what you want to see, but just put a prompt in there, see what you want to see, and take it from there.
But you know what the business people are gonna do? They're like, make me picture of watch that will make me money. Right? Like
good.
Like they will get so direct with it. They're like, what's my next icon?
Oh, exactly. Then generate the campaign and then generate the whatever else, and then, just do everything for me.
There still
are brands.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm just saying that there's a lot of brands, especially new ones sometimes, that make me feel like that. New and old, to be fair. It just happens. You see these super regenerative designs with hardly any marketing, and it's just like, it looks like any other thing, but it's $200 cheaper. Do you want this? No.
I have never actually, and we've tried this. We've tried to ask, it wasn't us, others on the team. I think Richard has done this a bunch of times, but asked generative AI to create watches. And while I can't speak for all instances, most of the time, what I find fascinating is that the way it generates a dial is not a complete dial. Like, it's kind of weird looking and distorted. Like, it looks from a glance like numerals and hands, but it's not 1 through 12. Sometimes there's extra hands on there. Sometimes the lengths are weird. But if you notice that it's almost like the human face. Like, you and I know what the human face is. But it's taken a long time for generative AI to make a human face that isn't grotesque, doesn't have something weird about it, doesn't add an extra ear or something like that, right? And the same thing with watch dials is that there's no specification that you can be like, hello, computer, this is a watch dial, so you can recognize it. AI first needs to learn what a watch dial is, and then needs to understand what's been made before, and then needs to understand this is actually a difference that people recognize. And so there's so many layers left to having, AI generative graphics tools make a complete watch. All that happens now is they're kind of examples or suggestions. Like a designer might be like, okay, take this watch and add these colors to it. Or if so-and-so imagined my watch with this thing, and AI will come out with some suggestion that all that does is it gets someone's creative juices flowing. It gives them a visual where maybe they didn't have one, but they then have to go off and actually still do the design. And so I feel like there's a high incorporation of AI for watch design, but it's, at least within our lifetimes, never going to replace the human. It like there's no part of the human element it takes out other than maybe doing research, which again didn't really exist before, other than that designer go on the internet.
I don't think, I'm not sure how quickly we can foresee how it will advance. But what I can say is that I think until now we can connect with things that were designed or conceived by other people, irrespective the tools that they use. If you listen to the music of June or something like that, or Hans Zimmer or anything from Hans Zimmer, you are like, well, it sounds very weird and very machine made or very out of this world, and yet you can connect to the person who made it. So it's just because it's distorted and whatnot, it still is a very human element to it. So I think that's where we're going. I would be sort of worried. Maybe it's more like an ego, that we want to like a self-preservation, where we like to think highly of our importance, and we say, well, it will have to come from a human before it comes from AI, and how could a machine figure us out? And that is the big question that we're facing today, where all of this is going.
Why can't we just be okay with the fact that if a machine does it far better than us, we should just give up that human task?
Because we don't know where this ends. Where is it? Where is the last human
progress.
task?
It does not ever end.
Yeah, well, but if it ends with us ending, then that's sort of a problem, isn't it?
We're never going to stop ourselves. We're never going to be like, hey, let's not do anything to preserve ourselves. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, but you just said, why don't we pass things on?
What?
You just said that we just pass the next task to the machine if it does it better. So what if it does everything
you said
better?
Where does it end? But I'm saying it doesn't end. We just keep doing that. I mean, we're not going to stop until we can control a bunch of machines with our brain.
Probably, yes.
Right? Yeah. And yes, maybe we'll go so crazy that we destroy our environment before we get off this planet. That's a whole other thing. But I am not worried about this. I think that I think that if a machine can do a certain task faster and better than us, again, no one's like, what we need? A room full of people doing math. This calculator, I don't know about it. Like the moment we had a calculator, we're like, oh my God, I don't have to do that ever again. That's great.
Whatever tool that humanity has developed over the years, and this is highly philosophical now and far from watches, but still, whatever tool that we've ever equipped ourselves or our societies with, it was never down to the tool, but rather how we used it. And we've come up with a lot of amazing tools and amazing technologies and amazing materials, and we had our highs and our lows in incorporating those materials and those technologies into our lives. And even if you have the internet, and I remember, I thank God I grew up without internet, and so I still remember those days when the mere concept of easily accessible information on anything at any time was just a dream, basically, or not even that. And now that we have it, it's a question of what we do with it. And yet people are more divided and more ignorant today and are misled with more crazy information than ever before. So although we have access to infinite amounts of information, we still don't use it correctly. So it's not a question of what is it that we have, but rather how we use it, right?
Well, where are we going to go with all those 1,000-meter dive watches? It's not that we don't want to use it. We just don't have a lot of options of where to use it.
Yeah, but that's. I don't think a 1,000-meter dive watch is a good example. I think a 1,000-meter dive watch was not designed for an actual use scenario. It was just like a one-upmanship on the other one.
You're destroying my dream.
Well, maybe next year's giveaway.
When I wear all my 1,000-meter divers, I'm imagining those actual divers 1,000 meters underwater doing God knows what, playing with fish.
I legitimately believe that we would still nevertheless have entries to this giveaway. Experience 1,000 meters depth with Ariel Adams.
And people will sign up.
Yeah, exactly. People will be like, well, I might die, but this is the first thing I win on the internet. I would go.
I mean, I love diving, but when it goes deep and there's pressures like that, like I don't even want to go to 100 feet. 100 feet feels like a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine those people that go really, really, really deep. Speaking of tools and the industry that makes them, we're going to talk a little bit about the status of the watch industry right now, which it's not surprising, but we know that the watch industry is going to be the last entity to ever speak honestly about the watch industry, right? Isn't that kind of funny?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
If you ask the watch industry, how's it going? It's the same response every single time. It's going great. Oh, look over there. That's yes. Literally what they say every single time in one way or another.
Yes.
How many times have you heard this? And this is funny. Not only amazing, but couldn't be better. Right?
Couldn't be better.
They love saying that.
That's
it's going great. Really couldn't be better.
Yeah, it's at times like this when we roll our eyes so hard we fall off the chair almost. It's like, well, it's nobody. I mean, it's human nature that people don't really want to say like, "How are you doing?" Terrible. It's like I don't think we have to overthink this too much. But
it's our fault for asking.
Yeah, and it's also true that we have those candid relationships in which these things could be sad, or every once in a while, and sometimes they are.
I think
but
when
most
we
of the
ask
time
people how they're doing, it's actually for very selfish reasons. It's, hey, should I avoid you right now? I don't think we really care.
Have the plague?
Yeah, it's like, yes, are you sick? Is there some reason I should avoid speaking to you? Are you going to bring me down? The question is, can I have a lighthearted, positive conversation with you or not right now?
Do you have a watch plague? The watch Ebola? Will my eyes bleed if I look at your watch?
I think that's one of the reasons there hasn't been that many watch events lately. At least there's been less, is because the brands know that their faces can no longer hide some of the stress and things like that. Why are we talking about this? We don't wish them any harm, but I think that it's important to have real conversations, because for years and years, myself, David, others in the aBlogtoWatch team have kind of had to like idle around watching dysfunction that we've like warned against. And then when it hits ahead and like there's real business issues, everyone acts really surprised. They're like, oh, we didn't see that coming. We didn't know what.
How did this happen?
Like, look at the last 5 years. We went from not enough watches to too many watches to not enough watches to too many watches again. And like, how do they not learn their lesson? If anyone, this is when I respect Rolex, who's for the most part been like, you know what we'll do? Just make the same amount of stuff.
Maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
But like, for the most part, it's the continuity. Like, they always talk about being long-term, yet they make the dumbest short-term decisions. Like, if car companies made the decisions that watch brands would make, I don't even want to, guess what would happen. But like, it's insane.
Yeah, it's funny because the long-term goal normally is to stay in business. We've been here for 200 years, so we'll be here another 200. We have time. And then they just scramble the moment there's any volatility somewhere. It's true. Not really sure. I mean, I don't think they have it easy because, the entire world has, just quickened up. It's more volatile in terms of like emotion, in terms of economics, in terms of everything that is tangible and intangible, and which is a lofty claim, but it is true. And so they have to like react really quickly, because at one point they have clients literally threatening their AD, sales people or sales staff. Oh, if you don't give me this watch, I will sue you, or I will do this, or I will do that. And then they start pumping watches out, and then everybody is like, well, Bitcoin is like this now, so I'm no longer a crypto bro, I'm not buying anything. So, and other issues with the economy. So, it's difficult. I'm not sure how fast we can reasonably expect the reaction time of a watch manufacturer to be?
I think one of the things they do, which I understand why they do, though I think it's not very smart, is every time they make a production of watches now, they're like, I want someone else to have paid for it. Like they're afraid of investing in production runs themselves. And I understand why pay for something expensive when you get other people to do it, but it comes with a bunch of strings attached, such as delivery requirements or price requirements or sharing or distribution requirements or things like that. And so a lot of brands, especially the small ones, got so addicted to the idea that they're going to offload responsibility to invest in production runs to other people, that they're always tied to all these strange obligations. And then they won't make watches unless they think that they're going to make money from them. Oh, if these haven't been pre-sold already, we're not going to make something. And I'm sorry, that's not the way the creative industry works. No one's like, I'm not going to paint that unless you buy it already. Well, you're not going to get very good art that way. And so the watch industry is thinking about trying to make money before they've made anything.
So who is the watch industry trusting these to? Is it like that? Who are the financiers of this?
Are you familiar with the term pre-order campaign? It's sadly mostly the consumer now. Okay. It used to be retailers. It used to be investors. Now it literally just comes down to, are there enough likes on Instagram for me to feel confident that I can build this thing? I mean, the companies are thinking so risk averse that they forget that's not what pushes a creative industry. You're not making widgets for a world that knows it needs widgets. You're making art for a world that needs to want to feel good and want to have reminders of those good feelings. And that's why it's so difficult to predict, because you don't necessarily know what people want to be reminded of, and you don't necessarily know what's going to be relevant to them in terms of the things they're seeing around. So you just have to keep trying new things all the time. There's no way of predicting it. We get this all the time with brands. What's the performance on my campaign going to be? Like, I don't know. How's your date going to be before you went on the date? You have to go on the date first. Like,
I don't know.
There's a lot of risk associated with this, yet there's this idea that and this goes into something I've talked about, where this is, almost religious following of numbers and metrics, this sort of metrics fetishization. But everyone is obsessed with the idea that there's some numbers out there that'll tell you if it's going to be a good decision or not. And that's true for like not that many things. Like most things in life, you can't do like a math equation and determine whether or not it's going to be a good outcome, because I'm sorry, you don't know enough variables to do such a good equation.
Yeah. And would you agree that this affects the creative decisions of the creative people at these brands as well?
You mean the creative people that leave to do their own thing as quickly as they can because the brands they work for refuse to do anything new?
Yes, that's what I mean.
I think I've answered your question. It's definitely affected them. Yeah. I mean, we have basically two scenarios. We talk to creative people in this industry that can't seem to get people to fund their idea, even though it'd be great, or people that fund super boring generic ideas and want to be different, want to pretend as though they've done something unique. So we have all these people who are actually unique that don't have enough people that want to know about them. And then you have all these people that make extremely generic things. They're like, hey guys, could you invent a reason why we've done it differently? Like, is that not a lot of what we see?
That happens a lot of the time. That's also true. But let's look at, but we have this tendency to look at the brands and rightfully criticize what is it that they do well and not so well. But let's look at the consumer as well. We have every year hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people buying boring watches. So if you were to set up a new business, who are you aiming at? Are you aiming for a small slice of this big cake in which, people are buying boring stuff and you finance that? Are you aiming for those people who are bored with boring stuff and are looking for something new, which is a much smaller cake, but maybe you can get a larger slice out of it? Because it's not like as though we have millions of consumers or customers looking for exciting watches these days.
The sad thing is that there's a strange formula that works really well when it comes to creative stuff, but it takes a long time and is the exact opposite of what creative people who go out on their own want to do. What they want to do is say, I'm starting a new brand. I want to be completely original. I want the name to be new. I want the design to be new. I want as much of this to not look like I copied anything as possible. So they end up making this very special watch just for them that takes them like 5 hours of explanation. Others like, oh, okay. And then they come out with their brand. It might be super impressive and even a great value for what you get. But the problem is no one understands it but them. Right? So then they not fail or they take a very long time to grow because they began doing what they want to do, and that was the wrong way. What you actually have as a better technique is begin by making something very generic. Get popular that way. Sell boring watches to less enthusiastic people that don't know that that's not original and who don't care and who want something nice and fun at a right price. Then, once you've made money doing that and establish some type of presence, you start to get a little bit more creative. All of a sudden, you change the case and the hands and maybe do your own thing here or there. And then a few generations later, you have now made something very original, but you had to start by making something boring. They cast a wide net. And as you developed a relationship with a market, you slowly but surely evolve into something which is unique. And that can take decades, really, sometimes. But that's the only way I see of doing it that works well, that allows people to truly be weird. Because if you're really, really weird at the beginning and you're not famous or really, really well connected or have a ton of marketing dollars and have the ability to sit it out for 5 or 10 years, I don't really know other way to get crazy watches popular fast.
Yeah, I mean, if you rule all of those things out at once, where you have no marketing and you have no connections, it's going to be difficult to launch anything. If you launch something that's boring, it's not going to stick either. I don't think it's going to have traction.
But how often do we see someone who's like, guys, my product is amazing. It's going to speak for itself. When people see it, they're going to understand it and they're going to want it. And we're like, yeah, but that's like 5 people out of like a lot. You know, like,
yes.
Like you need to sell, like these days, and I'm sure you'll agree, David, the brand owners, designers, founders, whoever, those personalities need to be sold as much as the watches. And sometimes people are buying them, not the watches. In fact, these people overestimate the average consumer's ability to look at like 5 watches and be like, that's one's the best. They don't know. Yeah. There's too many good watches out there.
Strongly overestimated, very, very strongly, very heavily. Yeah. It's also, very true. I've been having this idea for grinding gears, which we just published an hour ago on a different topic. But I had this idea for some time that the watch industry needs to celebrate its people more. It needs many, many more people in the spotlight, in their limelight. And I understand that a lot of these people are engineers and designers and not, who don't feel comfortable or don't perform well in the spotlight or, in the media or whatever. But I'm sure more of them do than the very few that we see today. And I just think that, the industry needs to offer these people up to be viewed, to be heard about, to be heard from, and for the greater audience to connect with. Because whenever this happens, if you look at how many icons there are and how many very successful watches there are, and how often those are connected to a person who may no longer even be alive, and they are like, well, but it's a Genta, and why do you care about Genta so much? And then people are like, well, this and this and this. And if it were not for this connection with a person, who knows how successful that design would be today, right? Or how desirable that watch would be today without a meaningful personal connection.
Speaking of Gerald Genta, I would like to have watch lovers try to identify the face of Gerald Genta out of a lineup. I don't think most watch lovers have any idea what he looks like.
But it's okay.
They hear his name all the time. No brand ever has any courage to actually show his face.
It will be the guy with an octagonal head.
But isn't that funny? Like, he's such a, even though he's one of the most well-known names, most people, again, when they're thinking about him, they're like, I have no idea what he looks like. So I agree with you. It's just hilarious.
Of watches. Yeah, but it's probably true. Yeah, you're probably right. He's not being shown too much. I don't think that they have the right to use his visualness, his image. I don't know how that works. I don't know. I don't know. And it's also like, oh, this can you put me in touch with him? And well, we're just using his face, but he's no longer alive. I think that's also kind of weird, isn't it?
But there's been a lot of photography of him. I mean, I've seen pictures of the man. I know what he looks like.
It's true.
He was a distinctive looking guy. Everyone that's ever met him says you will never forget the way he dresses.
Okay.
And yet people don't even know what his face looks like, let alone his dressing style.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was this foundation that was created, and he made sort of a comeback, his image at least, in recent years. And I for one was not really sure what that was about, but maybe. I mean, I want to get over this whole Genta thing. I think I'm alive now. I'm into watches now. Why would I want to be into watches designed by somebody who's? I mean, I appreciate all his work and I appreciate the importance of these watches, but I think Genta and his work has been very severely overrepresented and overhyped the last few years. It's been crazy. I mean, we need watches that, that I see now, that we see now launch. Like, oh, look at this. I've never seen this before. It's making me feel this way or that way. Not like, oh, it's the same thing from 1972, but with like a freaking like different dial or a millimeter larger. That's not a new watch. At least not to me.
This is Ariel Adams with a message about Citizen watches. Did you know that for years, Atessa models have been the best-selling titanium watch in their category in Japan? Citizen debuted their very first titanium case in 1970 and has spent 55 years perfecting the high-performance material for watchmaking. Since 1987, the Atessa family of timepieces has been where Citizen has showcased their latest and greatest technology. This includes the masterfully durable and lightweight super titanium case and bracelet material, as well as miniaturized communication technology that has allowed its light-powered eco-drive hardware to communicate with atomic clock radio waves or global positioning satellite signals. Atessa was born in the high-paced commuter metropolis of Tokyo, where being on time is just as important as being stylish. Atessa is a mature companion for booking a bullet train to enjoying omakase cuisine with friends, and is always fully made in Japan. The latest 2025 Citizen Atessa EcoDrive satellite wave GPS watches introduce ceramic bezels and a brand new case and bracelet shape. When Citizen merges its greatest inventions with thoughtful design and beauty, the result is Atessa. Explore the full range on the Citizen Watch website now. So I hear what you're saying. Absolutely. But I think when people talk about him, ideally they're romanticizing the type of designer he was, because there's not a lot of designers like that. And what he would do was very interesting. Of course, he was hand drawing because, that's what you did at the time. But he wasn't waiting for an assignment. He would just come up with designs all day long. Sometimes he would come up with it as he's sitting in a meeting with a brand. Sometimes he'd come up with a design specific for a brand, or just come up with a design and try to, marry it to a brand that, was working with him. But he drew thousands of these. And yes, he had certain themes that he was trying to stick within. Obviously, he's very prolific, but yes, he's one human being. There's only so much diversity of the designs. But I think that people like the idea of this person who's just compulsively thinking about how to make the next pretty timepiece. Mm-hmm. And that's what he was doing. He saw himself as an artist. He really liked Picasso, who was also a master of doing certain things quickly. Studied, of course, but doing things very quickly. And it was almost like, these street cartoonists, sort of like on the spot, come up with a picture really quickly. Like he was able to sort of take a situation and come up with something. And I think this would be a better industry if there were more artists like that. And frankly, the reason that there aren't more artists like that is because brands don't hire them or buy their work or do anything like that. Brands are very precious about it. It's interesting. Even the big brands, when they come out with a new design, oftentimes what they do, which seems kind of crazy if you think about like how beauty actually comes about, but they'll have like a brief. And they'll go to like a couple of agencies and be like, hey guys, come up with something for this brief. And it's, and the way they choose is based upon a mixture of ego and politics and just the taste of whoever. But it's not really like, let's make the next good watch. It's, I need a watch within this price point that we kind of want to fit this theme. And da 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 da. How would you approach it? How would you approach it? Sometimes just like, we don't even know what we want. Just come up with ideas. And then they just sort of see, this is how it makes me feel. And if you've ever spoken to an artist, the first thing they're going to say is that having to tell a committee that they should make the thing is the hardest part. Like, the true judge should be the consumer. That's why a lot of directors want the director's cut, right? Because they want to say, well, I want it to be the movie that I had in my mind. I don't want someone else to say. That's why it's a very desired thing to have the director's cut, to have the final cut of the movie, because ultimately that's what goes out to people. So for the artist to not have, in the watch sense, to not have anywhere close to the final cut is amusing because what people want to buy is that specific artistic vision. They're not buying a brief. They're not buying tech specs. Even if that's ultimately how these things end up getting made, that's not what the consumer wants. And that's why we love buying from these artisans, because it's literally just one watchmaker just like, you know what? I thought that was good enough. That's what I want to get out there. And that's ultimately easier to appreciate than, well, we had 7 different agencies respond to our brief. And then after a couple of revisions and people's A through Z putting in their input, this was the final 18 SKUs that made it. Like, there's no way of getting like aroused about any of that.
Yeah, Gento is not working that often with a committee and having to present all these things. Here's the design of Ariel on a napkin. Do you like it? Yes. Okay. Maybe it wasn't that easy, but I agree with you that it should not be this difficult. This is why we end up so many samey looking watches, and there are these odd dynamics that we don't know for a fact exist, but they certainly appear to do. Which, happens sometimes in large groups where, one brand must not create a better watch than the other brand within that group, because then it will cannibalize or hurt, that market, or make the brand look bad. If a higher tier brand makes a $10,000 piloty watch, then, a mid-tier brand is not allowed to make a better one with a better movement and an equally good design for $5,000, right? Somehow it has to be held back artificially.
What I've always found hilarious is, you're absolutely right. The brands sort of have in their mind who they see as their direct competitors, and sometimes within a group, brands that they don't want to compete with. What I find amusing is that while that is true in a business sense, the consumers never see these relationships. They're not they never see like, oh, I didn't think that was your competitors, or I wasn't like going to buy this one, but now I'm not because you have this one, right? Like, the consumers see it totally differently, and it's really not about who has similar price point or tech specs, or who has, a watch within the same theme. Like, oh, they also came out with a pilot chronograph this year. We have to sound the alarm. The consumers don't care. They make choices for very nuanced reasons. And I really think brands just be coming out with whatever it is that they want. If they want to compete with an in-group brand, let the better one win.
Exactly. But that's not how it works. And also the consumer does not care about, oh, okay, you didn't want to compete with your higher tier luxury brand, so I will rule all the others out as well. It's not like that. The competition outside of their group is still very much there against this freaking watch that they are trying to launch or launching this year. So just because they're not competing with others within a group, they are nevertheless competing with others outside of the group, and maybe others outside of the group want to create the best product there is, while these large group brands are held back artificially because you're not allowed to have the better movement. You're not allowed to have the better design. You're not allowed to have the better price point. Choose one out of the 3, but you cannot have all 3. And it's not in this way. The more expensive watches also get a little bit more comfortable in their skin, and they are like, oh, well, we don't have to push too much because we are not, threatened by others within the group. So I guess this is okay with, what we're doing. And if you look at some of the $20,000 plus watches that we saw launched by some of these brands, they've been just not very good watches, if I'm honest, and not good watches at all. And I've always wondered, how do these come about? And maybe part of the reason is that they are not being pushed by their owners, by their groups, and by their, sister brands.
So I had a call recently with a brand, very relevant in regard to what you're talking about. And they said, essentially, the money in charge, the investors, wanted us to have a certain price point. So the price point of the watches are because they wanted this. And so we built a product that we could have charged less for, but we can't because the investor wants a certain price. So their challenge now is to try to convince people that it's worth this amount, which I guess you can do, but it's just really ironic that they just can't charge what they want to. They're limited by this kind of dysfunctional thing. And we see so much of this right now in the watch market. It does make me worry significantly. And that worry is this incredible disconnect between the expectations of the people who finance the industry and the realities of what it takes for these brands to be successful in terms of how long, what people want to buy, how consumers behave. And so I want to spend the rest of our conversation talking about a sort of a hypothetical. Hopefully it's very hypothetical. And that is, what does a watch industry look like cut in half from today's size? Because I think we can see a future where the watch industry is not going to go away, but there's going to have to be a lot less brands because there's less factories to make this stuff, because there's less people to do all this, because there's less stores. There's just necessarily going to have to be less brands. It is not because of consumer demand. But the good news is that there's so many watches out there. There's decades worth of things for people to buy.
Yeah.
And the industry will have its resurrection. Remember, you can't have a cool watch brand rebirth without first having a watch brand death. So what are some of the things that come to mind that would happen if the watch industry was cut in half from what it is today?
Well, I think we should define cut in half, because when you have Rolex that sells, so many of its watches and people are waiting for it, then, who are we cutting off? Are we cutting Rolex in half as well, which is a third of the industry anyway? Or, where do you see this happen?
I mean, there's different ways of saying it, sure. But I'm saying across the board, there's a 50% reduction in, I guess, the number of watches made. I was thinking the number of brands. Some brands make tiny amounts. But when I'm just thinking, half the money's being spent, half the watches are out there. There's a lot less to go around. Yes, in some instances, it'll be a boom because the people that want these things, will be less of them, and that could increase the demand. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that more will be made, because we're talking about this industry cutting itself in half.
I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is that it would be beneficial for quality. It would be beneficial for the watches and for the product. I'm not sure why that seems logical, but it just does. I mean, we have the Hungarian railway system here, which is operated by the state largely, and it's a joke of itself. It's ridiculous. And sometimes I have this idea that they should just operate the train from point A to B and then back from B to A. And the whole thing should be just destroyed, not destroyed, but driven into the ground and just build up from we have just one train going from this to this and just back and forth. And if we can do that for a week without the whole thing catching fire or a derailment or, being delayed or something like that, we can add another one. We don't connect them, but this just happens like this. And this way, maybe we could figure out a system that actually works and we could scale it up. Sometimes I have this. So if I look at it from this direction or this point of view, maybe producing half the watches and having half the pressure that we have right now on production teams and suppliers and whatnot, maybe the quality, it seems logical, and the creativity would be better. I'm not sure. But the question also comes is by cutting this in half, would we remove, by definition, half of the customers as well? Which half of the customers are we getting rid of? Those who know what they are buying and are passionate about watches? Or are we getting rid of the quote unquote watch idiots, not the savants, just idiots who buy whatever it is that is a fancy color or a brand name or whatever, because they shovel a tremendous amount of money into the industry and keep it going as well. So which half of the customers are we getting rid of in this hypothetical of yours?
Look, I think that almost goes beyond the scope of it, because part of this is an unknown. So I think what you're recognizing is that certain customers will leave and they will no longer do business with the industry where they would have if there was something for them to buy. Also, you're actually mostly optimistic about it. You think that it's going to be a positive thing. You think it's going to put less strain on the more high-end parts of the industry. And I think in a lot of ways, you're right that the products that will still be made are going to be good. But one of the things I worry is that the size of the industry is part of what helps demand generation. Meaning, if industry gets too small, it runs the risk of becoming really irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And the watch industry actually has helped other, we'll call them craftsmanship industries, from dying, right? Like there's little tiny, like, I don't know, enameling things and just like tiny little crafts that like seem to only be left alive by the watch industry. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting that if the watch industry becomes one of those, who's going to save it? Is it going to be like the occasional, like, I don't know, automotive relationship with a watch brand, which is going to remind regular people? Because what I'm saying is that the volume of brands out there all trying to speak about themselves and watches in general creates a general awareness that there's a luxury industry of watches out there. And I think that's really, really crucial. It seems strange because we just assume that everyone understands the luxury car industry. But the question is, if people don't know there are luxury cars, do people still want luxury cars? They still need to know that these things exist. Know that this is a category at all. And so with the diminishing size of the watch industry, you run a very real risk of not explaining to enough people to begin with, there's this category of thing called expensive watch that you might be interested in. You see what I mean?
I see, but I think it would reinvent itself very, very, very quickly. Thankfully, I think, people are attracted to this idea of expressing themselves through a precious object. And right now there's very few of those that you can wear, especially as a man, but maybe that's changing now, but still. So I think the whole thing would reinvent itself. Whoever would, if we would get rid of all the luxury watches at once, whoever would make the first one again would have tremendous success with it and would experience a tremendous boom and gravitas as well with the audience. And people would be like, yeah, I want that. I don't want this crappy watch. I want this nice one. So I think it would reinvent itself very quickly.
I suspect that while a lot of watches are extremely overpriced right now, there's still a lot of really great watches for a low amount of money. And I suspect that if the watch industry were to cut in size, yes, things would become more high-end, but would also become impossible to make a lot of the things that are made today at the relatively low price points. Meaning that a watch that costs $2,000 today might necessarily cost several $1,000s more because there just isn't enough volume out there to make those parts so that people can charge that little. Like you'd have to go out and just order that 100 cases or something like that. So meaning the watch isn't any better, but because the production volumes have gone down, you have far less economy of scale, which is something that a lot of these companies still rely on for their relatively low cost manufacturing. And so I think that watches will be outside of affordability for many people because even a basic mechanical watch, because of the limited production and the small number of factories even doing it, will just cost that much more to make. You can see that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, economy of scale.
I mean, these watches have so many tiny bespoke parts that require absolute specialty to get right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I think it's nice the way that we have it. I don't think that this hypothetical, the interesting element of this lies in the economy of scale. I think it comes more from, again, which customers we're getting rid of. How would the watch industry sustain itself? Would it be through enthusiasts who are willing to pay whatever extra you mentioned for a higher price because of a higher production costs? It's an interesting mental exercise, but we appear to be going in two very opposing directions one year after the other. In 1 year, we have dozens, if not hundreds of new watch brands in our inbox every year, the aBlogtoWatch, don't we? And then, a year after that, what we see is like, oh, it's all doom and gloom and the suppliers are not producing anything because the big brands are not ordering anything. And then it's just, we are all going down. So which one is it? I don't think, we can follow through with the whole industry imploding. But it's just a much quicker up and down sequence as it is in life now. Everything is just faster. It happens more quickly, and we experience these ups and downs much more quickly than we used to do 20 or even like 70 or 100 years ago. It's just like it's like a harmonica that you compress. It's just like this now at this point, which is difficult to keep track of.
There's another element to this hypothetical, and that is if the watch industry decreases in size that much, watch media, as anyone knows it or remembers it, will also probably go away. And so the question is, a much smaller watch industry will have more difficulty communicating about its products. What does it do? Does it go back to being this niche thing that you only hear about in certain cities and certain parts of the world? That, you know, it's like if you're not amongst a bunch of wealthy people, you'll never see anybody wearing these things. You know, again, there's certain amount of volume necessary for there to be people interested in it. There seem, you know, all these people on social media where they you know, brands love them because they think they appear to work for free. All those creators have ambitions of making money, right? They're not just like, I can't wait to be doing this forever.
It's for free.
And for whatever reason today, there's this perception that you can make a lot of money on, I don't know, social media talking about watches. Once that idea goes out of people's minds, and you don't have a professional funded media, it all collapses, right? There's no more aspirational media and there's no more professional media. What's left?
Yeah, I think social media still, you know, it's the billboards of our time. You drive past one, you have an impression for a couple of seconds, and then you either remember it or you don't. It's a super highway of billboards at this point as you do scroll your way through the various brands and impressions and whatnot. But it's not like, it definitely has, I think, an effect on customer behavior and purchase decisions. You know, it shuffles around the top 5 or maybe top 8 brands that you have on your mind, which then you decide to read more about once you see a detailed article. Will I click on this? Will I spend 2 minutes of my time to read this article, or 5 minutes? Will I get into this or not? Have I seen a lifestyle or a person I care about wear this? Yes, then I will do some more research. So I think social media is useful in that sense. I wouldn't want to do it for anyone in the world. I think it's terrible. I'm no longer on Instagram. I still have my account, but I don't use Instagram anymore. It's just junk, basically. And I wouldn't want to be under that pressure of publishing everything at which time, and reading the mind of the audience is one thing, but reading the mind of the algorithm is another. So it's just a terrible place to be, I think, as a content producer and also as a content consumer, which is why I'm no longer there as a viewer either. So it's just something that I think already is going a little bit away, hopefully in some way or shape or form. And maybe not, but, you know, I think the industry would need both us and also this impression highway as well.
So you hear that, Mark Zuckerberg? We know that you're a relatively new watch enthusiast. Hasn't taken you long to buy a bunch of very expensive Pateks and Grubel Forces. Very happy about that. But ABTW _ David now says that Instagram is no longer good for watches. Yeah. What is watch lover Zuckerberg going to do about it? Is Facebook going to be David's new social media destination for watches?
We're back in 2010
Maybe
again.
that's how they rebrand Facebook now for watch lovers.
Watchbook. I remember I was very much into Instagram at the time when it was chronological order, and I grew to like 50,000 followers on my account by simply posting one time a day. I figured out the time of day. I figured out the type of pictures that people liked, and you know, before things could go viral, I had like 6,000 likes on pictures and stuff.
That's great.
Just because it grew naturally, and it was not pay to play. It was not like all this nonsense as it is today. And the moment the algorithm came into the picture and it figured itself out, the whole thing basically fell apart. And just because it's a pay to play thing now, which, okay, it's a business. It has to make money in some way. I understand that, but it's a very different platform to be on now as it was, which I guess is normal. I just don't want any of it anymore.
I just think that in an era without media, the watch industry is going to have a really tough time, because the watch industry as it exists today would not exist without all the media it gets. Like, you and I know that if it wasn't for what we do and a few other colleagues and people on social media, they would be selling very few watches. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I can say that very confidently. Like, if it wasn't for watches and media, no one's going to be generating that desire for that Rolex or that Richard Mille. Okay?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting hypothetical to ask, what would they do without it?
Nothing. I think they would be like, well, I guess we just have to I don't even know what they would do, because the product is, maybe they would, some of them would continue to believe that the product will sell itself, as they do sometimes, right? We hear that at least some of the time. Far too often, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually a different way of saying, after we made the product, we haven't calculated needing to spend anymore. So that's all we have to sell the brand with. I'm starting to decode their language.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's exactly what's happening.
I think that it's interesting that as, we have an interesting kind of relationship with the watch industry. This is where our careers are, that we have a lot of gripes and we have a lot of suggestions, always constructive feedback. I'd like to think that we don't just baselessly complain for no reason. But, as the industry goes through its struggling periods, we've been through several of them at this point. There's certain dysfunctions that pop up a lot. And you've been to some of the brands out there recently. I've been speaking to them. What do you see as being some of the major dysfunctions that pop up during these down economic times?
I always scratch my head when I see, the trouble economically and brands cut back very severely. I understand, there's a shock element to it, but we saw aBlogtoWatch rise to the top when, everyone was cutting their marketing spending in half, and they just kept spending the same amount. And they were like, well, now we're spending twice as much because everyone's spending half as much. So our impression is doubled, basically, just because we keep on doing what we're doing. And if you look at what happened to aBlogtoWatch in the 2010s, early 2010s and after, they just pushed really hard and it worked extremely well. Yes, they had the products to go with it. Yes, they had the collaborations to go with it, but they just pushed. And I've not seen a single instance in which that I can remember where brands were pushing for marketing, where they were trying their best and they failed. I think people are attracted to strong brands. It was a period, the last decade or decade and a half at least, where the brand gravitas overruled the quality or the importance of the quality of the product, right? People were attracted by brands, and where do I see this brand and how do I associate myself with this brand? Can I do that? Can I not? And then I look at the product. Maybe that will change. Maybe it's time for a product period now, but I definitely, to answer your question, think that brands in the time when, it's difficult, they should just try their best and push very hard. And it is their time to shine when everyone is just going back into their little, cave or something like that and not doing anything and just trying to wait out the storm. That's when you do your best and shine.
The funny thing is that the traditional Swiss logic is actually the most effective in this situation, yet they don't follow it. And that logic is think long term. There will be market ups and market downs. The best thing is to look at your long-term strategy and have stable production, stable growth. Don't turn things off. Don't be reflexive. If the market's going down a little bit, don't cut everything. Look at it long term. That is the wisest thing they can do. And that is, in a lot of ways, traditional conservative Swiss business wisdom. Yet they don't do that. They act compulsively like a stock trader at their computer, seeing a stock go down and wanting to offload it before it gets any lower. That's has nothing to do with how a watch brand operates, but that's more the mentality where they have this reflexive thing. It's like, wait a minute, we're not selling it as much today as we did last week. Well, then we better cut our advertising, which again is dumb. And they're thinking like, well, demand's going away. I'm like, well, you're about to kill any demand you had left. Yeah. And then what you said about advertising when others don't is a very real opportunity, because we're part of watch media. And I will tell you, especially a lot of other publications, if you're a brand and want special treatment, now's the time to get it. Okay. There's a lot of people who'll be very happy for your investment and will give you a lot. So what you can get for your marketing spending right now is more than you can get in a competitive era. And the funny thing about having a down or up economic time is, guess what, everyone? Same number of human beings out there. Okay. Whether or not people can buy right now, they're still reading. So you're still reaching them, even if the economy has the title of not doing well on it. Same human beings. They don't go away. If anything, when there's a bad economy, people read more, right? We know that. it's a very strange thing that they do that. Let me think of another dysfunction that I can think of, because we could just spend hours talking about how they don't spend enough and how it's silly. And we don't say this naively. It's not like I'm telling people to spend money they don't have. They do have the money. And if you've set yourself up as a watch brand with a few dozen employees and you have production and an office and all that, and you don't have marketing budgets, I'm sorry, you're missing a whole arm of your business. You are not a fully functioning watch business if you don't have the ability to do that. And we get a lot of complaints. We have no budget. I'm like, well, then you also have no watches, right? Because we don't really know what you're supposed to do with that. Anyhow, I see some other issues and dysfunctions happen when it's bad economic times. And that is related, and I have an essay, several coming out about this, but how there's a total creative flight. Rather than try new things, they get insanely conservative. And they surround themselves with yes people. So not only do they not want good advice, but they don't want to try anything new. And so all the people who would be great to work in the industry, the designers, the marketing people, the leaders that bring the dynamism and the creativity, humanity that we all love, they all run for the hills or are fired. Yes. So what we have is a watch industry right now that has, and I don't say this to disparage any of the good CEOs out there, but a lack of strong vocal leaders. This industry has always been one that follows strong vocal leaders. It has to follow the leader. 10 brands follow the lead of one brand. But there aren't a lot of brands leading right now. And that has to do with the leadership. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's a question of who do you define as leadership? Do you define it as the CEO of a brand, or do you define it, which I think where it lies, the leader of a group? Because sometimes we get the impression that it's not down to the CEOs, and it still is a leadership issue. It's just not. It happens at the brand level because it's oppressed at the group level, isn't it?
Okay. Visionary leaders that want the brand to succeed and recognize that money will come as a result of that. Not leaders who don't care about the product, aren't interested in the brand, but are only interested in this notion of either returns or this ambiguous notion of what's the equity value of the brand, how much is the brand worth. But that is not a leader. Leader is one that cares about the brand and the product it makes. And whether they're the CEO or at a group level or they're a designer, that doesn't matter. It's what their incentives are, what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the industry has its work cut out for itself. That's for true. That's for sure. Where do you see this going in the next 3 years?
I think a lot of it actually has to do with EU politics, because a lot of the issues at watch brands are not that different than the host countries that they're in. And the host countries that they're in also in a lot of ways suffer from strong, decisive leadership. And we know that the leadership of a country politically has a huge impact on the businesses there and the business confidence. And I don't even know who runs Switzerland other than the people. We know that Germany and France and the UK and well, Italy is a slightly different story, but most of the countries are having unstable leadership, not a huge amount of confidence. And I think that translates to a lot of nervousness and a lack of initiative on behalf of the managers. So if certain countries in Europe are able to start having leadership with a direction and a plan that people like and they execute it, I think that will influence the brands. The brands aren't going to suddenly become non-European, but it might mean a boom for countries that are not in Europe that make watches. Asia and the United States increasingly are, the United States is getting back into the luxury watch business in a lot of weird, funny ways. I think this is going to be a boom for them. I think that Europe is going to continue to sit on its hands and say, well, we still make the best watches while others make more money than them. So I think that they're going to sit on their ego, but not really venture out. I think that they're going to sort of just wait around. And that's what I suspect is going to happen. Others will take the opportunities away from them.
Isn't that something to look forward to?
Well, I mean, like I said, we've experienced it, and we're we're just a fan of good watches. We want people to wear nice watches that they enjoy from a company that they can relate to. And, we all have companies that we love in all the major countries that make watches. I really can't think of a region that doesn't have something to love about it. But I think what's important is that the Swiss need to remember that there's no guarantees that people out there are going to be into luxury watches. These are people that inherited this industry. It's hundreds of years old, and they've just been told people want this forever. They think they're immune. But they never talk about the death and rebirth cycle, which is so much a part of the modern watch landscape. The Favre Luba comes back for the third, fourth time, something like that. You know what I mean? People forgot it had to die a bunch of times before that. I'm excited about the rebirth, but also I'm not shocked if some other brand dies and then later comes back. You know that there's people out there that own portfolios of sometimes dozens, if not hundreds of dead, like old brands, sometimes like watch brands, luxury brands, textile brands. There's people that just have portfolios of those things because these companies have been dying for a long time, waiting for someone to bring them back.
Yeah, eventually many of them are brought back.
That's what's going to happen. We're going to be 80 and someone's going to be like, I need to bring this brand back. Only you guys remember when it was awesome. Can you run it for us and revive it? And we're going to be like, oh my God, I remember that brand.
Leave me alone, I'm 80.
Oh, see, as an American, I'm fully aware that I'm going to be working till I die. No retirement here, just some other project.
Yeah, great. I think that's all of us. But it's nevertheless, that's something to look forward to when we're 80. It's going to be hilarious.
I think that's a really big difference between people. I actually I never think about retiring ever as big a thing. And other people are like, you mean I'm not going to retire? Okay, that's been this show of Superlative. We've hoped to talk about some interesting things from the state of the industry to the importance of marketing to how artificial intelligence and generative AI are going to have or not have an impact on the watch industry. We're just about 2 months away from thinking seriously about Watches and Wonders. I think people will hear the show probably just before we go there. But I'm going to be excited to see what it's like. And as predicted, and I know, David, this does not surprise you, Watches and Wonders week this year is going to be even bigger than last year with a lot of more brands at the show. It's getting into the hundreds of brands that are not displaying in Geneva. Is it time? We just have to clone ourselves using AI.
Yeah,
there needs to be the David bot that shows up to certain meetings.
David bot.
Feed David bot watches in his mouth.
And then we just run away with the latest sapphire case, Duplo, sunflower nonsense thing. Yeah, that's David bot. No, David bot, no.
I mentioned a machine. They just put the watch in there. All the pictures happen. It'd be great. Yeah. Okay, everyone. So we look forward to our next chat. Maybe we'll do another one of these after Watches and Wonders when we've been able to experience all the new timepieces. I will thankfully not be there for the public days because if there's anything I don't want at a Watches and Wonders show, it's more human beings getting in the way. Yeah,
I'll be there probably.
The public day? You can be the documentarian.
Yeah, I'll do that. Oh, the stampede, Ariel, the stampede. For the Rolex tote bag, it's real.
People think we're joking. They're not. Okay, everyone, this has been the Superlative Podcast. Ariel and David saying goodbye.
Thanks for listening. Bye.